You're listening to The Dating Den with dating and relationship badass and best-selling author Marni Batista. Every week, you'll get the raw truth from top experts and real people on the important dating, sex, and relationship issues you want to know about. So if you're ready for true talk that's authentic and unfiltered, and you're not afraid to be called out on your stuff, then you're ready for what's next.
The Dating Den with Marc and Angel Chernoff. The number one relationship you must have in your life. Ladies, welcome your fine asses into the Dating Den. I am so excited today because we are going to be talking about happiness, how to have happy, successful relationship. And what I love about my guests is they have broken it down for us into 1,000 little habits. And while we will not be discussing 1,000 here, you are so lucky because they have a book, which is fantastic, to learn all of those habits. Let me tell you a little bit about Marc and Angel Chernoff. They're professional coaches. They are full-time students of life, admirers of the human spirit, and they've been recognized by Forbes as having one of the most popular personal development blogs. So you should check that out too. All of it's in the show notes. They have a blog, podcast, books, live events, courses. They've spent the past decade writing about and teaching proven strategies to find lasting happiness, success, love, and peace. They live in Florida with their young son. How old's your son? Oh my God, he's so little and cute and cuddly still.
Yes, we think
Most
so.
of the time.
Most of the time. Well, I have 3 daughters. I never had boys. So maybe they're cute, cuddly, and a little smelly. I don't know. I never had one.
Sometimes, you're right.
Sometimes, exactly. Well, I'm super happy that you're here. I'm really curious, like, what was your motivation, to really dive into happiness from this perspective of the, 1,000 little habits?
Sure. Well, I tell you what, so I'll give you a super quick background on us. About 12 years ago, all of our work was born out of personal necessity for overcoming grief. So 12 years ago, we lost a sibling and a mutual best friend back to back to suicide and illness. This was also the downturn of the economy. And so we were both out of work. We were struggling financially. We were struggling with grief and trying to process that. We were a newly married couple at the time in our late 20s. And we just were not prepared for coping. We had no vehicle for doing that. And so long story short is we were not, as a couple, a married couple, having the conversations we needed to have. We were distracting ourselves with alcohol, with binge watching television, with running away from each other and the conversations we needed to have, and admitting the pain that we were feeling. So one of the things that helped us out were habits. We realized that what we had to hold ourselves accountable to were some simple things, but the consistency of doing these things by ourselves and together as a couple were incredibly important. And that was ultimately what kind of saved us and led us truthfully on the journey that has become our life work, which, like you mentioned earlier, I mean, we're coaches, New York Times bestselling authors. That's still kind of crazy that one of our books hit that, and led us on a journey of really helping people overcome some difficult points in their lives. But obviously, relationships are a huge part of that. I mean, all of us, whether it's intimate relationships with family, parents, and so forth, everything is relationships. And so the rituals that we build in our lives and the habits that we build are either moving us towards healthier relationships or detracting us from those relationships, right? They're holding us back. So that was the premise for the book. And the idea is, hey, this isn't rocket science, but there's a lot of little things that we can do consistently that keep us on track or take us away from where we want to be. And we need to have that front and center. We need to have some type of resource that we can pick up and remind ourselves consistently.
I love that. Angel, I'm super curious about this because one of my clients said the other day, I thought when I got the relationship, all my problems would go away, right? So there you guys are. You're like in your late 20s. You have the relationship, right? I'm sure you sort of did whatever plan you thought you were supposed to do. And then life happened. I would love for you to just kind of talk about, I think there's this like mythology that if we would find this right person, then we would be happy, right? Like it's the person or the condition or the situation that will somehow give us the key to happiness. And people can say, I don't really believe that, but I think actually at an unconscious level they do.
Oh, absolutely. And it's in all areas of our life,
Yeah.
right? It's whether, it's the perfect relationship or the perfect job, or when I make this amount of money, my life is going to be glamorous and I'm going to be happy. And you're constantly reaching for that moment, right? But when you reach it, it's not all that you thought it would be, right? Because so much, especially with our relationships, we've got to be happy with who we are on the inside. One of the first chapters in our book, it talks about, self-love, self-worth. And because that's where you have to start. That's where it's really important. You talk about what are some of your closest relationships in your life and most important relationships. I'm going to bet you the majority of us are guilty of blazing right past ourselves, right? And we wouldn't even mention the relationship we have with ourselves. And so, yeah, it's not reaching this perfect relationship. I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect relationship, but doing the work and doing some time to self-reflect on yourself and starting there first.
I love that. I found this section in your book and I just thought it was so interesting. And then Marc mentioned like you guys weren't having like the right kinds of conversations. By the way, and I loved like, drinking wine. Let's have a bottle of wine. Let's just watch 5 movies this weekend and not talk. But you have these 5 questions that can save your relationship. Tell me about those and why we need to be intentional and how we can create rituals of connection around those conversations.
Sure. I think, in generally, questioning in a relationship is really important, tuning into each other, right? Those particular 5 questions are baseline and foundational. But like Angel mentioned, we have to be cognizant of how we feel, right? Like self-inquiry and inquiry in a relationship is so vital. Tuning into each other. How are you feeling, right? Like what's bringing you down? What's bringing you up? How can I be of service? And doing the same thing with yourself, like Angel mentioned, we blaze over the own relationship we have with ourselves. And we absolutely need to stop loving the idea of other people loving us so much and fall in love a little bit more with the idea of loving ourselves and caring for ourselves and meeting some of our own needs because we can't give what we don't have. Like, how can we possibly be life-giving to another human being if we ourselves are depleting ourselves, right, with our own behaviors and actions and habits?
Yeah, and one of those questions is, what has been making you feel alone and unworthy? I think it's important to have these tough conversations and to raise the question so it's not something to shudder from or feel embarrassed about talking about, but putting it out on the table like, hey, what have I done lately that you've really enjoyed? And also, what's been making you feel alone and unworthy? And putting that out on the table can help, each other step forward and feel like you're heard and seen, and then also to make a difference. And
it helps you uncover each other's love languages, really, because we all experience things differently. We have different needs. We're not all the same, even if we've been together. I mean, Angel and I have been together like 20 years now, and it's like we still have differences, And so tuning in with questions like this, sometimes the smallest thing goes over our head. I mean, I'll give you an example. Through the pandemic, Angel had mentioned to me, she's like, we don't have any quality time together. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, my goodness, we're working together, we're living together, we're parenting together, we're in the same 4 walls all the time. How are we not spending time together? We're together all the time. But she just meant, hey, like we've been foregoing date nights and stuff like that, a bit more formal. It went over my head. But once she pointed that out, we developed like a little habit of having this daily tea time or coffee time that was 20 minutes, 30 minutes some days, just the 2 of us. And it really filled that gap. So again, the only way to know that, though, is to tune in to ask some of the hard questions.
And I think, you're giving more evidence of that core thing because, I think someone could, look at that question, what's been making you feel alone and unworthy? And Jane asked Jeff and Jeff tells her, and then she's like, oh my God, that's not what I was trying to do. Like being defensive, right? Or being sort of like victim-y about it. So even to have these kind of like high quality conversations in the scope of the relationship, if you can't hear that without shame or blame, it's not gonna work.
Oh, absolutely. And also asking these questions before it turns into the problem, right? Like when you're screaming at each other the answers, well, then you've waited too long to start the conversation.
That's so true. I was on this panel Saturday through the Hoffman Institute, and it was like a webinar sitch, so people couldn't ask these questions live, but they were chatting them in. And I would say 70% of the questions were some version of should I stay or should I go? Right? Like, I'm into spirituality and my partner isn't doing his work fast enough. Or how long do I wait, before my person changes in this area? And I'm super curious because, having a happy, successful relationship, and I know you talk about this in your book, is, condemnation of a person's character, right? Which is like assuming, that I'm right and you're wrong and my way is the best way. Like, how do you address those kinds of questions that people are just, kind of like chomping at the bit to get someone to tell them the answer?
Yeah. Well, so there goes back to the self-reflection, right? So you absolutely can't force someone to change faster than they can feasibly change. In many cases in our lives, like in our relationships, the people aren't going to change. But along those lines, we can change how we respond to them, right? In our response is our power, and in our response is our best attempt, really, the best possibility of actually conveying the reasons we need some changes to happen. And so the only way we can have a conversation that is calm and productive and healthy is if we're in the right mental space, like Angel just mentioned, right? Like when you're already chomping at the bit and ready to like attack your partner or your friend or family member, or whatever, because you're so frustrated with them, you've waited too long. But you can reconcile things with yourself first, and that's the key. It's not when you're in that emotional state, don't step into an argument. Sit down with yourself and think about this person that's driving you nuts. Okay, let me say, like, for example, imagine Angel's driving me crazy. And I think, oh my gosh, she's so selfish, right? Well, I don't need to sit down and have a conversation with her right then. I need to address that. Okay, when I'm thinking of Angel right now, I'm thinking that she is the most selfish person in the world. All right, Mark, who am I with that thought in my head, right? In Angel's presence or anyone's presence? Well, I'm angry. I'm irritated. I'm not going to behave in my best way. So, like, what else would I see, though, if that wasn't the focal point, right? Sure, I'm irritated right now, and sure, Angel maybe did something that made me mad, but what else is there besides that? So what else would I see if that wasn't what I was focusing on and I didn't have that tunnel vision? Well, I would notice that she's an amazing wife, that she does other things that are incredibly fulfilling to my life, and I'm very grateful for it. I might even challenge myself with the opposite. Angel is not a selfish person, right? And give myself clear examples of where that is 100% true, right? With real world examples. And again, I'm doing that for myself, not to fix Angel in any way, but to get my perspective right, to broaden that perspective, to realize that when I'm angry with somebody, I tend to have tunnel vision and I'm asphyxiating on the one thing about them or the few things about them that are driving me mad. And when I show up to any conversation or any space with them, it's going to come out, right? And so I need to address that myself first to have a more calm, collected, and call it enlightened mindset before I even try to step into a conversation with them. So again, it begins with ourselves. And that's where you need to start. And quite frankly, some conversations, when you do this, when you kind of practice this with yourself, you realize, you know what? It's not that big of a deal. Or I want to rush them along for all these changes, but you know what? They are making a little bit of progress. You start to see the other side of this, which can help in so many ways.
Angel, what do you do that's annoying?
Sure,
what does Mark do that's annoying? No, I think that's so powerful because I think, look, I would say that most of the people that are listening to this that are in a relationship tend to default to binary thinking, right? So like there's so many opportunities to think through whatever lens, like, should I stay? Should I go? Is this an issue? Am I putting up with, right? And I love what you said, Mark, about really you're asking yourself, like, what's the question? And that's what I said on this conference. I was like, I wonder if there's a question underneath the question. Like what's really going on, even that you're constantly needing someone to change or prove or those kinds of things. So I think it's also goes back to having space and doing that self-reflection. Do you ever talk about like the repair kind of a conversation, right? Like, Angel, how do you guys recommend that if someone is sort of, I call it leaking, if you've leaked and had a moment, do you take the 20-minute break? Do you meditate? Like, what do you do to kind of come back and say, I'm sorry in a healthy way?
Yeah, I think the pause is so important, whether it's 5 minutes or 20 minutes or sleeping on it. I think, when we get in those disagreements, we're so quick to let our emotions get the best of us. And I think taking that pause is vitally important for you to then respond and say, okay, we got a little heated there. This is what I heard and this is how it made me feel, right? So using that language, so you're not pointing like you, and the person's feeling attacked, but just saying, this is what I heard and this is how it makes me feel. So just switching that language slightly can make a big difference. So you can still get your point heard, right? You can still feel heard and seen. And, with disagreements, there's so much to talk about there and to unpack. But, we can both be right. You talk about binary and if one person's right, one person's wrong. I think that sort of thinking is going to get us in a lot of trouble. I think, it's important to realize that we both can be right. We both can have our own truths based on our interpretation of a situation, right? And that can be okay. But being able to create a space where we can both feel heard and seen is what's really important.
It's amazing. So for the ladies who are single, you're like, oh God, please stop talking about relationships. I will, because I want to talk about happiness. Because I will always say that, someone is going to be attracted to a person who is, energetically happy. So I'm curious, how do you define happiness, today? How are we defining happiness?
I think happiness is a lot of it is, when we all have varying levels of happiness, depending on what's going on in our lives and just depending on how we're biologically wired. What's important is to be at peace with yourself, right? I think the foundational part of happiness in a relationship is to have some level of wholeness and peace with yourself. Because we can't give, again, what we don't have, right? We have to have some of our bucket full in order to be able to share that bucket with somebody else. So, for the an initial relationship, I mean, it really, again, starts with self, but also presence and being passionate about being there with that person, right? When you are feeling somewhat whole and you're uncertain about, meeting somebody new or getting involved, all of those are natural feelings, but we have to check ourselves a little bit. One, I think we have to check the difference between uncertainty and fear. Right? Uncertainty will often manifest itself feeling like fear, like there's a fire burning there and like I need to run from it. But when we're entering a new relationship with somebody, of course, there's uncertainty, and that's important to acknowledge. But we don't have to be immediately scared of that uncertainty, right? We don't it might feel like fear, but we're not scared. We're just a little uncertain. We're entering new territory, and that's okay. And it's important while we're doing that and dealing with the stress of that to, again, fill our own buckets. And that can happen in so many different ways. But once we feel more full, we're going to show up a little bit more easy, right? And again, what we want the focus to be on initially is presence with a person, truly paying attention, not waiting for passion to arrive, but showing up with our whole heart and soul into the moments that we're sharing with this person. And this is as much relevant to, somebody you've been married to for 20 years as it is to meeting someone new, right? Don't wait for the passion to show up behind a rock someplace. Show up into the moments that you're sharing with someone that you care about or someone that you're interested in with your whole heart and soul. Because when you have your full presence and your heart and soul in something, that's where you're going to be able to collect the data, right? You're going to be able to say, okay, I put my whole self into it. Now, how do I feel coming out of it, right? And that's an important place to be.
I think you said something so brilliant because you were talking about uncertainty and happiness. And I'm curious how we can take some little habits to fill ourselves up with happiness when we are entering into the realm of dating and vulnerability and having to be resilient, having to set boundaries and all those things that can cause such discomfort. How do you build up happiness while you're in the and of discomfort and uncertainty?
I think you got to create that space to fill your own bucket, right? And that's going to look different for each and every one of us. But for me, it's like having that time to slow down, right? Where you're not go, go, go. But you have time to slow down and honestly, that's one thing that has come out of this pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Is it's forced us to be intentional with what we are putting back on our plate and what is necessary and what we were just doing because we were on autopilot, and that's what we've always done. So the pandemic has definitely made us reevaluate what we are going to add back onto our plate and forced us to slow down and really, spend time with ourselves, to listen to our own heart and mind. So I think it's important to create that white space, right? To slow down, to be quiet, to be still. And then also to do the activities that fill your own bucket as you're putting yourself out there and, in that area of discomfort. Filling your own bucket and then reminding yourself that with the discomfort comes growth. And so that's a good thing.
Yeah. It's an interesting point is to in your leisure time, it doesn't have to be just nerding out, right? So that's not necessarily incredibly fulfilling, right? Even to binge watch Netflix, we all do it. I do it. But if you're thinking, okay, you know what? I'm feeling stressed out from the dating game. I'm stressed out in this relationship a little bit. I need some time for myself. You don't want to run away from life, right? In life, we never achieve anything by running away. We achieve things by moving towards something. So rather than running away from the pain, step into it a little bit, sort things out, do some of that self-inquiry, meditate. Angel goes to a float studio. It's something she loves where she floats in it's 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt. And it's basically a form of meditation and forcing yourself to be alone with your thoughts, but it's again, it's figuring out what are some tools and strategies that really work for you that allow you to unwind and fill that bucket of yours.
And I think you said something so important here. It's not going to be freaking butterflies and roses all the time. Right. And so it's because you guys are, talking about habits of happiness. There's times when you're not going to be happy. Right. Sometimes I think that's another one of those urban legends, right? Not only if I get this, I'll be happy, but if I'm not feeling happy, then there's something wrong with me because I'm so smart, or I've gone to therapy, or I've read this book, or I did this thing, and people just beat themselves up about it. How do you address those moments where you're not feeling it?
Yeah, well, and I think that's where the habits come in, right? Because habits are something small that you're doing on the daily. And when times are easy and happy, hey, it's a breeze. But where they really kick in is when the times are tough, right? And that you've been doing this work and you have these systems in place, these habits in place, so you can check in with yourself and the relationships around you, because it's something that you're already consistently doing and not just something that all of a sudden now on the tough days you need to start implementing.
Right. It's being proactive. Right. The simplest way we could talk about this is using a cliche like gratitude. Right. Yeah. So all of us know in personal development, gratitude helps. And it does. I mean, positive psychology studies have shown time and time again, if you sit down and reflect on a few things you're grateful for at the end of a day, you're measurably happier after a few months if you've made it a consistent habit or ritual in your life. That said, it's super easy. It's super common. It's almost a cliche at this point. But it is a cliche on the easy days, right? Because on a good day, it's so easy to sit down and reflect on a few things you're grateful for. Where gratitude really matters is, to Angel's point, on the incredibly hard days, the darkest seasons of your life, when it's almost impossible to find anything to be grateful for. On those days, gratitude can save your life literally, right? And the only way you're going to possibly find gratitude on those really, really dark days is if you've been consistently grateful leading up to them, right? That's where the ritual or the habit of gratitude saves lives and makes a world of difference. Not on the easy days, but on the hard days. And the only way, again, you can possibly find gratitude on hard days is if you've been consistent with gratitude, right? So the same thing for our relationships. We have to have some habits in place. No one's above this. We have to practice slowly. It is a practice. It's about doing things consistently for ourselves and for each other that strengthens us, right? That keeps us on point, that allows us to reflect, that allows us to look at some of the things we're doing on a daily basis and go, okay, is this actually moving me forward in my relationships and life, or taking away? Because it does both, right? We have habits anyway. So if you know that there's something broken about you or your life or your relationship, it's also important to look at, what am I really doing on a daily basis that actually fuels this problem? And then what does my ideal situation look like if I could have it? And what might I start doing? What small shifts might I start making that would take me from point A to point B? Again, we're never above this. It's always about practicing. So yeah, I mean, it's the consistency of doing that through the good times helps you out in the bad times. And that's when it makes the most difference.
I read something somewhere that said real commitment is when you act on the 100th day like you did on the first day you did it.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, I'm going to do gratitude. And like for the first 5 days, you're like, I'm doing gratitude, right? And then on the 100th day, when you don't feel like doing gratitude, having that same commitment, right? Because you're committed to the overall happiness of your life or joy or peace or whatever it is. So I think that's amazing. So let me ask you this. I think this is such a fabulous possibility, but maybe it's not possible. Can you have a happiness picker when you're dating, right? Because we always say like your picker is broken or you're picking unavailable men. Like, can you have a happiness picker? Like, I only want to date a guy because people are like, I've done the work. It's a glass half full, like.
I mean, I guess we can both take a stab at this, but honestly, I don't believe that you can. I really think that it's about truly being present with somebody. It's about putting your whole heart and soul into the moments that you're on those dates, especially those first dates, and really paying attention, right? Not worrying about what they're thinking of you, but really paying attention to them. What do you think of them, right? Like so often, I mean, it doesn't matter what the relationship situation or social situation is, we often are at least partially consumed with worrying about what the other people are thinking about us. And that is a distraction, and it's worth recognizing that, right? That pulls you away from the presence of collecting the data about this interaction and this circumstance and this person that allows you to make great decisions about them and your relationship to them. So I don't think that there's a magic wand at all. I do think that the more presence that you can put into that situation, that date, the more you're going to take out of it, the better decision you're going to be able to make. The goal would be not to, should I go on a second date or not? The goal would be to have been so present that right? You have the data collected that is necessary to make a logical, informed decision.
Yeah, and I'd be worried that if you're just basing off of the happiness picker, so you say, that if it's straight up, happy-go-lucky, the glass is always full. What are you not hearing, right? Because none of are happy all the time, and none of our stories are all happy-go-lucky. What we each and every one of us has a story, has been through some tough times, some dark seasons. And so I think to really get to know somebody is to also be vulnerable and let people see both sides of us.
I think that's so true. I think that I was saying to you before we hit record here, like that there's this idea that I'm going to look for this person who's the same as me, right? They're on the same level all the time. And when the initial attraction, wears off and somebody has a really crappy day, that's really when you can start to look at what habits do they have in practice to be resilient, right? To get back to compatibility, to get back to that kind of happiness. So
yeah, how are they investing in themselves, right? How do they handle the bumps in the road? I completely agree.
What's the happiness habit in your book that is probably like one of the most powerful and the least used or often forgotten?
Oh God.
Like the least sexy habit, but it's got a lot of power in it.
I tell you what, how about catching yourself with the silent treatment? That's something that we often don't talk about. In and of itself, it's silence, right?
Right.
That's such a toxic thing. I mean, it's something that we all do on some level. It's almost a natural tendency that we have. And yet when we're trying to get to know somebody or when we love somebody deeply, it does the opposite of what we want it to do, right? Like this is running away instead of stepping toward, right? It's doing the opposite of our intention. And the silent treatment does not just remove you from, the argument you're having with somebody. It definitely removes you slowly from the relationship you have with them. It removes the possibility of reconciling things and making positive progress. So that would be the first one that comes to my mind. And again, super common and not often talked about.
I want to tell you that I think that's so huge. And I also want to say, don't do it on text, right? Like even when people are in dating, right? And they're like, you know what? I'm just not going to answer him. That's still the silent treatment, people.
Oh yeah, totally. It's like, I'm not going to respond. I'm not going to initiate conversations. You're absolutely right. It applies in person, voice, and via text.
And don't just give me a thumbs up. Don't just do that little thing either, because that's like really pisses me off. Angel, what do you think is in the book? Like, what's your least sexy but most powerful habit?
I think it's along the same lines, is us realizing that you're doing hateful gestures and thinking that that's communication, right?
What's a hateful gesture for? Like eye rolling?
Yes, exactly. Okay. Like eye rolling, huffing and puffing, name calling, like none of that is going to help the communication. That is not serving you. That is not helping you take a step forward. So really catching yourself in those moments when you feel yourself going down that hole of name calling, right? And saying, okay, this is not healthy communication that is moving the needle forward and helping me move towards a healthy relationship.
When I'm like want to strangle my husband sometimes, like what I do now, I'm getting so good at it, is I can feel the rage in my body. So I like take a breath and then I like do this thing where I like flutter my eyes, right? Because I'm like trying to feel the feeling. I don't want to roll them. I don't want to do the like the big sigh, And so it's like my husband's just like, he's like waiting for it to pass. But it's been really powerful, right? Because I'm just dealing with the feeling, like Marc was talking about before, where like, what's really going on? Is he really doing that? Is that a narrative that I have? And really wanting to control all those gestures by just being with the feeling in my body. It's totally taking practice.
Yeah, it's a form of taking that pause, right? Like, I do not need to engage in this right now. I know I am not my best self, and I am not helping the situation by going down this rabbit hole. So by you, fluttering your eyes and controlling yourself, you're also taking that pause and realizing that you do not need to partake in this invitation right now.
Yeah. It's funny because it kind of goes against the whole, never go to bed angry idea.
Yeah, what do you guys think about that? Because I always love to talk to relationship experts about this question.
Yeah, I mean, that's another cliche. The philosophy of it in general is good in the sense that, hey, reconcile things, have the hard conversations. But the idea of not sleeping on it is, I disagree with it in general. Angel and I are both on that same page where, depending on the severity of a disagreement, certainly you don't want this to go on for days and days, but sometimes we need a little space to collect ourselves, to calm down. And in some cases, the same way we might sleep on a big purchase, right, and then decide differently in the morning, we might sleep on a very difficult situation in an argument that we're having or something that we might think is the right thing to say. We might sleep on it and wake up in the morning feeling a little bit more calm and collected and have more clarity with it. So again, the general philosophy of have the tough conversations, absolutely good. The idea, though, of rushing it, not so good. I think sometimes it is good to sleep on it. It's certainly, like Angel said, good to take the pause, collect yourself, maybe question it again, go back to, who am I with this thought in my head? What else would I see without this thought? What's the opposite? Can I find some truth in that? And so forth. Like really tune into yourself and be able to sit down and have a calm, healthy relationship conversation as opposed to one that's heated and driven by anger, frustration, and so forth.
Yeah, I think that when my husband and I are having a fight and we want to go to bed, we agree to be still in the fight, but we do like the foot hug. Right? That says like, I love you and I'm here, and also right now we should just talk tomorrow. So I'm a fan of the foot hug.
I love that.
Yeah, it's funny.
So last question. When people come up to you guys, and say, what's the secret to 20 years, Marc and Angel? What's your answer? And I'm so fascinated to know if you have the same answer.
I think it's important to be able to grow together. Are we the same people that met 20 years ago? Absolutely not. Are we the same people even a year ago? We're both constantly growing. And I think it's so important to let one another grow and to be patient and to communicate. I think there's so much importance in that, and recognizing that we are constantly changing, right? Based on events and circumstances, and children, no children. Like there's so much that goes into having a life together and having these intimate relationships close by, that it's being patient and listening and being open to what the other person is going through.
I definitely echo the same thing. I mean, in the practices of are simply creating that space and time to have conversations, to tune in with each other, to truly pay attention to one another. To not define, you mentioned condemnation earlier, but even beyond just condemning somebody, pigeonholing them, right? Like, oh, Angel is who she is, right? Like, she's that the same person I married. Like, we are always changing. We are always growing. We are always learning and adapting. And so as a couple, I mean, it's very healthy to acknowledge that in ourselves and in each other, right? And that goes along with everything Angel just said, but creating the space to do that both personally and together, right? You have to have that reflection and to realize that we are growing and that we are different, and that some of the mistakes I made in the past are not who I am, and some of the mistakes Angel made in the past are not who she is, right? Like you learn the way on the way, and acknowledging that fact that actually changes who we are as individuals is very important as time goes on.
Did you learn something new about Angel from living in the four walls for the last year or so? Something new?
I think just the necessity really for like that personal time, that date night type of time, right? Like that was the thing that kind of got lost on me, is that although we were always together, it wasn't necessarily quality in the sense that we were really tuning into each other more on a romantic level. And not sexual, but like, hey, like, let's just have an intimate moment of conversation and just that kind of intimate space with just us, not related to business, not related to family life and our son and so forth. So I think that was a little lost on me in the beginning, because I felt like, oh my gosh, we're always together, which was a great thing, but I didn't feel the need to really zero in on that, but she did. And so I learned that about her. Like, part of her love language is really having those more intimate personal moments that are kind of like almost date night, as I would say, but they can look different. They can be tea time, it can be coffee time and so forth. Just us together. It doesn't have to be something that's more elaborate. And I actually liked that too. I'll say I'll learn that about her, is that it's not the lavish, night out on the town that's so important. It's really the time and space and the conversation shared during that kind of moment that's important. And that can actually be done in a much more simple way, in a much more organic way, which was cool to find out.
You guys modeled something so important too in that. Like, I think so many people are like, he should know, like after 20 years, he should know I need and it's like, I love that Angel just took leadership. It was like, this is what I noticed. This is how it's making me feel. And this is what I need. And so to expect anyone to just like know what you need and to magically fix it is not real. Like the happiness picker. Angel, what did you learn about Marc in the pandemic? Did you learn anything new besides the fact that he is very eager to make you happy all the time? Date nights.
I think one thing that I learned is like, he needs his own space too, right? Like, because we're in such close quarters all the time, here for me, I'm thinking, oh, we don't have enough quality time. But for him, he was like, hey, he needs that space, right? And that's not an insult to me, but that was like, okay, he's used to having some time on his own, whether I'm running errands or doing other things, or he's out of the house. We were missing that alone time, like individually with ourselves. So I did learn that it was important for him to have his time to do what he wanted to do on his own without needing to be involved and without also feeling left out.
I love that. I think there's some movie that I saw recently where like the husband was like, oh, can I please go to Walgreens? Like, I'll go get the, can I go get, do you need cereal? I'll go. Like, it's like that 5 minutes of like, and so when the pandemic hit, meant like, couldn't go to CVS. We're like, we'll order it on Instacart.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I got to meet you. You guys are amazing. Ladies, check out the book, 1,000 Little Habits of Happy, Successful Relationships. All the details are in the show notes. You guys are amazing. Congratulations on 20 years and an amazing son and living through the pandemic together. And ladies, whatever you do it with some damn dignity. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Hey, thanks for tuning into today's show. So if being in an intimate relationship in which you feel 100% seen, heard, and accepted by a high caliber man is a priority for you right now, and you're interested in seeing if you're a fit for working with me and my team at Dating with Dignity, here's what I want you to do. Just head over to DWDVIP
That's D as in dating, W, D as in dating, VIP.com, and book a call to speak with my team. We'll get on the phone with you for about 60 minutes and you'll get crystal clear on what's stopping you from finding true love right now. We'll also take a look at what you want to create, what you want your whole life to look like when you're able to finally be fully expressed as a woman in a healthy relationship with an incredible guy. And if we can help you get from where you are right now to where you want to be, we will show you the fastest path possible that makes sense for you to do that. We help smart, successful women all over the world solve this one missing piece in their life so they can finally have it all. So to see if we can help you do the same thing, head over to dwdvip.com. I'm Marni Batista, and let's talk soon.